Hey everybody, welcome back to COVID Connect. This week and next week, we're going to be taking a look at a topic that I'm really excited about, the kings of Israel. Now, I know that we've all probably heard about the most famous kings like King Solomon or King David, but those kings are just a part of a much larger story, the story of the kingdom of Israel, that takes up a pretty large chunk of the Old Testament. This is a really fascinating story in and of itself. It's shocking and thrilling and exciting and tragic. Understanding this story will really help you understand the mindset of Jesus and the people he lived with. And like everything in the Old Testament, this story also has a lot of lessons that we can learn and apply to our own lives. The most important thing to understand right off the bat is that God originally did not actually intend for the Israelites to have an earthly king. You all probably know the story about how the Israelites escaped from Egypt and wandered through the desert under Moses, and then entered the Promised Land under Moses' successor, Joshua. But when they first arrived in the Promised Land, in the land of Israel, they actually did not have an earthly king in charge of them because they didn't need one. God was there to rule them and guide them and protect them. The problem, though, is that the people of Israel kept abandoning God and kept sinning. And the more they sinned, the more disorder they brought about, like wars with other nations or even conflicts among each other. Even during this time, God was with them. He kept reminding them of his laws. He kept sending them prophets and judges to save them. But the Israelites kept turning their back on God again and again and kept sinning all the same. Eventually, the Israelite people got so fed up with all of the disorder that they started demanding that God appoint an earthly king, a human, to rule over them. And if you read this story in the first book of Samuel, chapter 8, you'll see that God is actually really disappointed and upset by this request for a king. And that might at first seem a little odd. But understand that when the people ask God for a king, what they're really saying is, we don't trust you to keep us safe. We don't trust you to keep order. We don't trust you to protect us. We want somebody else. The irony is that the whole time, the Israelites would have had peace. They would have had order if they had just listened to God's commandments in the first place and done what he wanted them to do. But essentially they were too stubborn to do that and change their ways. So they blamed all their problems on God for not giving them a king in the first place. God did grant that request, and we'll talk about how that happened tomorrow. But I find this story to be a really helpful reminder to myself that so often I can be my own worst enemy. I know that in my own life, so many of my own problems or my own sources of unhappiness are really just caused by me making bad choices or failing to be the person that God wants me to be. I think it's easy to just complain and blame others and blame God, but I try to remember that God is calling me, just as he's calling all of us, to be something so much greater if we just trust in him and carry out his will.